back to my channel and welcome to today's video where I'm yet again reacting to your rat cages. So this is going to be the third, technically the fourth installment of a series on my channel where I react to your rat cage setups and give you constructive criticism or tell you things I think you've done really well. So as always, I did want to start this video by saying that I did get so many of your cages sent in. I think this was the most amount of cages I've ever been sent. It was well over 200, possibly even 300 cages to look through, which is amazing. I'm so glad that you're getting involved. But obviously that does mean that I can't feature every single cage in today's video. I will possibly use some of them in a second video if this one gets too long, but just wanted to say that I can't unfortunately show every single cage, but I still really appreciate you sending yours in. If you haven't seen the previous videos where I reacted to rat cages, I will leave those linked in the description as well, just in case there's a similar cage on there that I gave pointers and tips for. You may be able to use those tips and apply them to your own cages. Those videos will be linked down in the description. So without further ado, I'm going to try not to ramble and dwell on each cage just so I can get through as many as possible. So let's head on over to my extremely broken laptop and have a look at some of your cages. So the first cage is from Stacey and it says, "This is my cage for my two boys, Cookie and Cream. I love their names." So taking a look at your cage, straight away I see things that I like. You've got the IKEA tie holders, which is really good. You've also got a nice big dog rope for them. Something I did spot in the background, which I also really like, is the hanging kids net storage thing. I've not been able to find these anywhere. I think this one is from IKEA. My local IKEA doesn't have them, but I like that you've included that in the background as well. You've also got a dig box for them. Even though you're choosing not to use a loose substrate on the bottom, you have provided them with a dig box with shredded cardboard in, which is really good and allows them to forage in that, so I think that is great. Moving down the cage, I see a couple of chew toys which look really nice, and then at the front is a white metal shelf. Again, this is from IKEA. I have spotted this in the past and thought about using it with my boys. The only thing I'd say about this is watch out for possibly their nails or their toes getting stuck in the gaps. But apart from that, I love that you've utilised that in the cage, and I'm spotting lots of things from IKEA, which is good. Overall, I think your cage looks really great. There's plenty of things for them to climb on. There's also lots of hammocks and places for them to sleep, like in the baskets and stuff. The only thing I would say is the wheel at the bottom. Unfortunately, that is a bit too small. I'm not too sure how old your rats are, but if they are babies, they are going to quickly outgrow this wheel. I think this one is the 11-inch Trixie wheel, and for males especially, you are going to want to have a wheel that's about 16 inches or more, and unfortunately they are going to outgrow this if they've not already, so I will just take that wheel out. Moving on, we have a cage from Thomas in South Africa, and he says that he has a Savix N03 Empire, which is home to his two boys, Fred and George. And firstly, can I say Fred and George are so cute. I love the pictures you sent me of them pea fishing. They're just so adorable. In terms of tips for your cage, firstly I would try to attach the Sputnik at the top, just because they are such a good thing to hang at the top and fill that space. And I would also try to remove the shelves and the ladders in the cage. This will make so much more space for you to hang other things like ropes and ladders and other things for them to climb on. Instead of making it too easy with the ladders and the shelves, you can just take these out. They do tend to pee on them, so I would recommend taking them out anyway. But if you do this, you can give them a much more active layout. Another thing I have noticed is taking a look at the bottom of the cage. I see you're using the same bedding in the whole of the cage and also in the litter tray. I would recommend purchasing a different type of bedding, specifically to go in the litter tray. Paper-based cat litters work really good for this. This will just help you if you're trying to train them to use the litter tray. It helps them to distinguish the two different areas if you're using two types of bedding, so I definitely recommend looking into that and watching my video on litter training if you're getting stuck. But using two different beddings will definitely help you if you're trying to litter train them at the moment. So the next cage is from Avery, and it says she's getting her first pet rats on May the 4th. She's getting two female rats. There's no bedding in the cage yet because it hasn't arrived. Is there anything else I could add to the cage to make it look better? So I'm not too sure on the brand of the cage or the measurements of the cage, but just going off the size of the Sputnik and the Pringle tube, I would be slightly too concerned that this is a little bit below the minimum size for rats. They do require a lot of floor space. Although they do enjoy climbing, having adequate floor space is also really important for them, so I would definitely check that your cage isn't below the minimum size. I do recommend not going any smaller than about 80 by 60 centimeters on the bottom, so I definitely check that first. But in terms of the cage itself, my main tip for this cage, if you are going to use this for the time being, is to take out the wire shelves and ladders in there. They're not going to be good for your rats to stand on with their bare feet, so I do recommend taking these out. You may just have to use some pliers to kind of lift up the sides of the shelves to get them out, but that would be my first tip. Once you've done that, that will free up so much more space to add in things, because at the moment, once you've put the hammock in, there's not too much space to put anything else. If you can somehow manage to take these shelves out, this will allow you to have a much safer cage for your rats, but also allow you to hang other things like ropes and possibly a few more hammocks and other things in there for them too. So the next cage is from Anastasia, and this is actually a handmade cage for her 2 rats, Dory and Luna. The first picture is of her 2 rats eating some cat grass, I think, and they look really cute. So here's a picture of her handmade cage, and firstly I'm really glad that you've meshed out all of the sides. I see a lot of people making handmade cages for rats and only meshing out the front. Ventilation is so important for them, so I'm really glad you've added 4 sides of ventilation when you've chosen to make your own cage instead. I like that you've added the ropes on the bottom to allow them to climb back into the cage whenever they want to. I think that's really smart. And just looking at the cage in itself, all of the interior of the cage looks really good. There's plenty of things for them to climb on, places for them to sleep, things for them to chew on and things like that, so I think the way you've decorated the cage is really good. The only thing I would say is, even though you've said the cage is 5'7", I've not got actual measurements for the base of the cage. You did say you couldn't fit a dig box in the bottom. The only thing I would say is, although you've already gone ahead and built this cage, I would say to anyone watching this in general, if you do want to make your own homemade cage, that is perfectly fine as long as you make sure you're giving them plenty of floor space as well as vertical space, because it is really important to make sure the floor space of the cage also meets the minimum as well as having plenty of height. If you're using like an old cupboard or a wardrobe or something and converting that into a rat cage, please just make sure the floor space is enough for the rats as well. The next cage is from Sarah, and she has 2 male rats called Bubble and Squeak, and they are 1.5-year-old males that she got just over a month ago. So she's not too sure what the name of the cage is because she found it in the attic, but I'm not too sure what brand of cage this is either. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments. But I'm not too sure of the measurements either. Taking a look at this specific picture with the rats in it, comparing the rat size to the cage size, I do think unfortunately this cage is a little bit too small. I'm trying to work out the size of the cage based off of the bath mat in the bottom. If this is the bath mat from IKEA covering the whole base of the cage, I do think unfortunately this cage is a bit too small, especially for 2 adult fully grown rats. I do think you have the right idea with the things you're putting into the cage. You've got plenty of hammocks and beds and places for them to hide and things for them to chew on. Unfortunately, you are going to be quite limited because the cage is so small. You can't add too much in there for them, and you can't add too much for them to climb on either, because the cage, as well as it being quite small on the base, is not very tall either, so there's not too much you can add into here, or too much that I can really suggest you add in, unless you did go out and get a bigger cage for them, which I really suggest you do that for them. If you were to go out and buy them a bigger cage, preferably one that has a much bigger base and also gives them a little bit more height. I notice you're also feeding them in a food bowl, which is fine, but rats really do benefit from being scatter fed. So if you did have a much bigger cage, you could hide this food. If you didn't want to use like a loose substrate, you could just have them have a dig box instead with like shredded paper. I think that would be really good to hide their food in and make them move around the cage and work for their food. I think that would be really good for them too. Oh, the next cage is actually by Jade. I didn't even realise this when I saw your email, but Jade has some really cute rats, and she's also drawn a couple of my boys. She's super talented. I've got all of her artwork on my pin board, so hi Jade if you're watching this. So this is the Pet Planet cage, and it has her 4 male rats. So in her email she said that she needs to keep the second tray in the cage because one of her boys Finley is super clumsy. I think this is fine. I love that you've got a perspex tray made for the top as well as the bottom, just to allow you to put plenty of bedding in that level as well. I think it's perfectly fine to keep that in there, and I think it looks really nice because you've made the perspex for both. I also love the sign you have attached to your cage. I think it's so cute. She said in the email that her and her granddad made it, and it has all of her rats' names on it and little paw prints, so I love this. I think it's really cute. But yeah, I think your cage looks good. They've got plenty of things to climb on. You've got a nice big wheel in the back, which also matches your colour scheme. They've got plenty of bedding in the base to dig around in or forage, which is good. And I think I can also see some foraging toys I think that's a foraging ball at the front, and then you've also got one of the snacky mice at the top. So yeah, I think your cage looks really good. Next is a cage sent in by Emily, and she has 3 boys, Hector, Tofu and Mochi. Their names are super cute. The email says, on the lower floor there's a cardboard tube that goes the length of the cage. The cardboard box is full of bedding and shredded paper. The plastic bowl was for the enrichment of the day, which is blueberry fishing. She also said that she's had to move her cage from her boyfriend's place to hers because of the quarantine, and she was only able to bring the top half of the Critter Nation, which I think, taking a look at your cage, you've done a pretty good job making sure it's still really busy and fun for them, given the fact you've had to split the cage, so I think you've done a really good job. So if we look at the cage, it has a really nice pink and purple theme if that's what you're into. I think it looks really cute. There's also plenty of things for them to do as well. You've got ropes, ladders, plenty of nice places for them to sleep. I love the big cardboard box you've got, which also has a really cute cat face on the front with paper and stuff for them to forage around in. I think I can also spot a foraging toy which is aimed at parrots, which is also really good for them too. The next cage is from Catalina, and she has 3 girls who are about 5 months old, and I really don't want to mess up saying their names, so they're here on screen for you guys to read because I really don't want to mess them up. So if we take a look at the first picture, the first thing I see is your girls, and they're really cute. And then the other thing I spot is the buckets you've got hanging up in the cage. You've cut out a gap for them to get in the buckets, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone use this idea before, so I think that is really cool. I also like how many wooden bridges and items you've used in the cage. I really like that little small one that's kind of hanging. I've not seen too many of those in people's cages either. And then you've got the classic bendy bridges, which are really great to use in your rat's cage. The only thing I will say is, I know your girls are only 5 months old at the moment, but the silent spinner wheel, I think that's the brand of it, in the background, I'm not too sure whether this is the 10-inch or the 12-inch. But with female rats, especially adults, you do kind of want to aim for a wheel that's about 14 inches, so if you can get them one that's slightly bigger when they're slightly bigger, I think they would really appreciate that too. But yeah, I like your cage. It has a nice active layout with plenty of things to climb on. The only thing I would add if this was my cage would possibly be a few more hammocks, or even like a space pod and some ropes going through the cage. Things like that you could also add to the cage as well. So the next cage is from Vanessa, and she has a double Critter Nation with her 3 boys in, Peanut, Bear and Sprout. And I won't lie, I picked this cage to go in the video purely off of the last picture you sent me of all 3 of the boys in a box. That picture just tugged at my heartstrings and I couldn't not show it in a video, so everyone please appreciate how cute these rats are, because I've been staring at this for like the past 5 minutes. They are so cute. But apart from that, I think your cage looks really good. You've got plenty of things for them to climb on and places for them to sleep and plenty of baskets and stuff. The thing I like about your cage is the dig box at the back. You're using like a shredded tissue paper in there, which is a good alternative if you don't want to use the cocoa soil or the dirt that I use in my dig boxes. You can also experiment with different substrates for them, and shredded tissue like this one is also a really good option. The next cage is from Brooke, and it has 2 girls living in here. I'm not too sure what their names are, but looking at the pictures, they are super cute. So if we take a look at your cage, it is an okay size for 2 females. I wouldn't worry too much about the size of the cage, although you could upgrade them if you wanted to in the future, and if you intended to get more rats than this, I would recommend getting a bigger cage, but for 2 rats this is fine. I do really highly recommend though that you take out the wire base of the cage and also take out all the wire shelves, or at least try to cover them with something so they're not standing on bare wire all day. Again, you should just be able to either pull these out, or you might have to use pliers to take these out, but I really do recommend you try to take at least the base of the cage, the wire base out, because it's not going to be good for your rats to stand on. Although it is quite easy for everything to fall through, and to clean it, it's really not good for them to stand on that, so I really do recommend taking out the wire base at the bottom. Another thing I spotted in this cage is, unfortunately, the wheel you're using is going to be too small. I'd be surprised if your rats were using that. Just because of the size, I don't think they could run on it comfortably, so I do just recommend taking this out. Unfortunately, I'm not too sure whether you could get a wheel in here that's not going to take up the entire cage, so I do just recommend free roaming your rats instead to give them exercise, instead of putting a really big, decent sized wheel in that's going to take up the whole cage. I did spot in this picture of one of your really cute girls, you do have a Snack Shack log in the background, and it does look like your girls have had a go at chewing this. I mentioned this in a previous video, which I'll leave in the iCards and the description, but these really aren't safe to use with your rats, so I do recommend taking this out and not using it. You've got plenty of other chew toys which are really cute and they can chew on these instead, but I do recommend taking that one out. So I think I'm going to make this one the last cage, but I do have a lot more cages left. I might possibly save all of these for a future video and do another part to this, so don't worry, this is going to be the last cage in this video, but I will do another one in the future. So this cage was sent in by Matilda and she has the Savick Royal Suite 95 double and she has 2 girls and 2 neuter boys living in it at the moment. So the thing that I like about your cages straight away is the fact you have such a nice theme going on. I love the winter theme you've got going on with the first one. Everything in this matches, from the hammocks to the white bedding. I really like the boxes you've got in the middle and you've cut little holes out of them. I think that is super cute. But I have to say my favourite out of the 2 themes you've done has to be the naturalistic one at the bottom. I love the fact you've got a dig box in the back and you've got some plants growing in this. And I love the big piece of wood at the front for them to climb on. I think that's really great. I also love the fact the bedding at the bottom again matches the whole green theme. I think it looks really good. And you're really good at theming your cages. I could never commit to doing something like this, but I think yours looks amazing and I think you've done a good job. I did see in the email you mentioned that you wanted to take out the middle tray, but you've been hoarding so much unhangable stuff for the cage that you don't want to go to waste. With this you could possibly drill holes in these items and zip tie them to the cage instead, or if you didn't want to do that you could just get a couple more of the shelves like you got in the first picture, or if your cage came with like the metal shelves that most big cages come with, you can just put these in instead and take out the middle tray and still have a semi-active layout. So I think I'm going to stop there. Thank you guys so much for sending all of your cages in. I'm sorry if you were disappointed that your cage didn't get featured, but hopefully some of these tips you can also apply to your cages too. If you like this video and you'd like to see more cage reactions or pet related videos in the future, don't forget to subscribe and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!